Welcome back to the dev server. Today we are going to be taking a look at some new planes as well as some new mechanics, because they actually went and added something that we have right here. It's the testing of medium range missiles with active radar homing seekers. I will get into this in a second here, but I want to take a quick look at all the new planes first. We have the F-28 Tigershark, and this thing is, as you might imagine, basically an F5 with an F-16 engine. It also kind of flies like one, but keep in mind at 12.0 you are essentially gonna be a worse F-16. It sounds very good. Yeah, get an F5 with a radar missiles, as well as a much better engine, and the acceleration is definitely very welcome, and it feels pretty competitive. At super low speeds, however, it's a bit of a boat and you will lose dogfights, even if the F-16C, which is a bit of a bus, just hammers its elevator and goes full balls to the wall. It will lose a ball to the wall fight against something like an F-16C. We haven't tested it too in depth just yet. Keep in mind the price is also absolutely obscene, so I would recommend holding off with pre-ordering this thing for now. Overall, it feels good, but at 12.0 they are probably going to be better planes, and for a premium I think that's absolutely perfect. Let's take a quick look at the loadouts here. You can of course run 6 AIM-9Ls, or you can run 2 AIM-7Fs as well. However, keep in mind that once you start doing this, 1 9L, and you have to choose here. So it's either 2 9Ls or 1 7F, and that's kind of a hard call. I might run it like this, but I do think that having 2 missiles is better than 1, especially with how inconsistent the AIM-7F really is at the moment. Nothing really wrong with it. It looks a little bit cursed, and the missiles are definitely way too big for this plane. But overall, it's essentially what you want the F5E to be. However, keep in mind, a whole ass 1.3 BR higher, so you won't be even able to see your little or your big brother in the same map, whether you are fully down or up tiered, regardless or depending on which plane you are playing. Overall, pretty decent addition. Not what I thought it was going to be, but of course, the flight model isn't final yet, so I don't want to comment on it too much just yet. Let's also take a quick look at the ground ordnance, of course. We have the nothing. We have some bombs here, rocket pods, bombs. Overall, kind of what you can expect. Then we have Germany, and this thing actually surprised me quite a bit. I did some dogfighting against my guy Jay Black, and he flew the G91R3 as well as the MiG-17, and you can actually dogfight those planes. Now the MiG-17 does have the upper hand here. Keep in mind this is a ground striker, so it being able to hang is pretty damn solid. G91, you can actually kill quite nicely, and I'll put some clips on the screen right here. You can tell that at high speed this thing pulls obscene amounts of turn rates out of its ass. 14G for a pretty prolonged time, and the speed bleed isn't too bad. At about 700 to 500 it kind of gets in a speed range where it kind of turns into a brick. However, if you go super slow again, the flaps are pretty solid, and because the speed bleed isn't that high, you're actually able to dogfight relatively reliably, and it actually feels pretty decent to fly. The roll rate is very good as well. The only real issue is that you don't have real anti-air capabilities other than the gun on the bottom. Now of course it is a ground pounder, so you want to look at the ground ordnance, but overall this isn't that fantastic either, and I think that the G91R3 is just a better pick. For now at least. The flight model, I mean, they're pretty close. I do think that the G91R3 is a better overall plane. In a 1v1, if the G91 doesn't play it passively and he actually takes the fight, you can win. However, keep in mind the G91 is much quicker, has better acceleration at high speed, and overall just fits the meta a little bit better. Also because of the guns. The 27mm isn't that fantastic. And overall, this plane, not much to talk about. It's kind of a plane of all time. Mostly carried by low speed flaps, high speed pull, and just a roll rate overall. It feels very good to play because, well, it's a trainer aircraft, so that's kind of to be expected. Looks kind of goofy, especially if you put some ordnance on it. Like the rocket pods are way too massive for what this plane actually is. But overall, not really looking up against it, if that's proper English. I won't really mind playing this thing. That's what I'm trying to say. However, at 9.0, MiG-19s, F-104s, you know, those kind of planes, Yak-38s with missiles, you are basically going to be too slow to dodge R-60s, so you need to preemptively turn into those. So carrying 1 or 2 rocket pods might not be a bad idea, even though it looks incredibly goofy. And that's really all there is to it. Then we have the Su-25 SM3. Now the main thing here, of course, are going to be the new missiles. It's essentially just the Su-25T that we have over here, but we do have some new missiles. I'm testing it as we speak. I'll add some clips in here in a second. But if you want to use these for anti-air, I recommend the 38 MLs, the TV guided ones, the MTs. Don't lock onto the enemy planes very reliably. You basically won't get a solid lock until they were like 1.5 to 1 kilometer away directly in the head-on. Whereas the laser one, you can lock on from like 15 kilometers, and the guidance is actually pretty okay. Of course, they are not anti-air missiles. They won't hit everything. They're not like some gimmick missile that hits every time. It's kind of funny. And of course backed up by the R-73. And no, you will not be able to carry anything else on the pylon over there with an anti-air missile. So we have some bombs, rocket pods, kind of the usual. And then here there is unfortunately no R-60M or an R-73 to back up your second anti-air missile. Or your first anti-air missile. Because it doesn't have any on the wingtips, which is a little bit unfortunate. Overall loadouts are pretty solid. However, I think that at 11.7, this thing is going to be a little bit of a struggle bus. Of course, I need to make a video on this thing. And let me tell you in advance, it's most likely going to be live commentary. Because this thing, well, it's the same thing as when I flew it with Odd Bars, with the F-14 special duo at the end. I can't make a proper video on this without just losing my mind. So I think I'm just going to go live commentary. You'll see once it drops on the real server. Then we have a Buccaneer, and there's really not much to talk about here. You do get AIM-9G stock, but that's really it. I mean, if you look at the modification, you get the 540, the 1000, and then some rocket ports. Overall, the stock grind of this thing is probably not going to be super fantastic. You don't have a gun, you're a damn high BR, you're not very fast, you do have countermeasures, but overall, I'm not sure if I can even make a video on this thing. I'm not sure if I even want to. Maybe with like some funny missiles, but I don't think this is gonna go very well. I might run with rocket ports and try to kill people that way. But yeah, this is really just a ground pounder. There's really not much to talk about. For the skin here, there's nothing. And I actually forgot to show you, but the other planes also have no skins, as far as I'm aware. Because I pre-ordered the F-20 myself, and it wasn't there just now, and it still isn't there in the game. Now we get the Buccaneer. I'll see if I make a video on this. It's just a ground pounder. I can't really comment on this thing. Probably going to be okay with the stock grind with those missiles, but overall, a bit of a A9L mobile, and that's really all there is to it. And then for Japan, we get essentially just absolutely nothing, as far as I'm concerned. We do not. And then we have China, which also gets essentially nothing. Italy gets quite a few things actually, and the first one is going to be the new tech tree. So we have the Yak-9P, which we have in the Russian tech tree. This plane is decently mid. Now you can run a different kind of gun sets on this thing, but overall this plane isn't really fantastic, and there are much better picks to choose from. However, in the Italian tech tree, this might actually be one of the better planes to fly. Now, if you have the 109 G2, that is very good as well. You can fly the G14 AS and the G56. Those are my picks here, and I think that the Yak-9P might actually be the best pick out of all of them, despite the fact that this is kind of mid. Mostly comes down to the BR and the ease of use. I would personally rather fly the G14, and the G56 is simply too high of a BR. I think if you really have to choose, I would say get the G2 or the Yak-9P. But keep in mind, this plane isn't that fantastic if you aren't familiar with it. Then for rank 5, we have an IL-28. Doesn't really need an introduction. As well as the MiG-15 BIS. Now, it does get a new camo, I guess. And other than that, it gets the stuff you are used to. MiG-15 BIS at 8.7 is pretty damn solid. But keep in mind, 8.7 might get up-tiered. And at 9.3... and 9.7, the plane definitely isn't as strong as it can be. Very good in the 1v1, but if they disengage, you are going to get absolutely nothing done. Then we have the big brother, the MiG-17 PF, and this is just a LIM 5P. So you have the afterburning MiG-17, you don't have any missiles, you only have 23mm, so you don't have the 37, whether that's good or bad, it's a little bit up to personal preference, but overall this thing is a copy-paste that the German one has. So we have the MiG-21 MF, which is essentially the worst SMT that you have at the same battle rating. It's the same one as in the German tech tree. Has the worst engine, it is a little bit lighter and it turns better because of that in the, well, low time frame kind of. The longer you turn, the worse this thing becomes because you simply lose too much energy. The SMT is overall better. This thing is more maneuverable, and at 10.3 it's a pretty damn solid plane. Then we have the MiG-21 SMT BIS SAU. Same deal as with the one that we already covered about 12 times on the tech tree or on the channel. Decent missile set. 11.0 kinda mid, but right now with the new decompression going on, it might actually not be that terrible. I haven't flown it out yet with the new matchmaker, but it might actually be kind of okay. I'm still not looking forward to flying it again because I already covered it like 4 different times. And then we reached kind of a... Some people are not really happy with this. I do like the camo on the fuel tanks. We get a new Gripen. That is also going to be an Italian tech tree and the MiG-29. And it looks like a 912. So you are not getting the funny R-73 missiles. But at 12.0, I think this might be okay. We'll have to see how it pans out with the matchmaker on release. And if they might increase actually to 13.0. I doubt it because it just happened. And the 12.7 is probably for the active radar homing missile event that's going on right now. So don't hold your hopes up just yet. Overall, MiG-29 is pretty solid. The F-16s are still going to cook this thing, and as well as everything that is at 9 or 12.7. But overall, I mean, it's kind of what you're used to. It's just a MiG-29 that we've already flown, and then of course the JAS-39 Gripen. It's essentially just a Gripen C, and there's also not really that much to talk about. Now let's look at the loadout here. You do get the BOL pods, and for the people that aren't aware, the BOL pods are these countermeasure slots that make your amount of countermeasures obscenely high. So they're like in the rails, and they start dropping countermeasures out of them. You can see that it's not over here, it's not at the back here. So they are different rails, they have flares in them. They are a smaller caliber, so they don't like provide as much heat or luminosity as it's called in this game, which is basically the brightness of the flare, which determines how hungry the flare or the missiles are to go for the set flares. And that's really everything that's new. We also have the Su-22 M3. But yeah, this is not really worth flying in my opinion. And I don't really want to look at it too much. And then we have the Alpha Jet E. Now, the Alpha Jet E is essentially the same thing. I'm not sure what the difference is here. Someone in the comments will have to tell you, because I'm not able to find it. Loadout looks the same. Plane looks the same. Engines are the same. But I do prefer this, this camo. So this is probably the one that I'm going to be playing when the server goes live. And then we have Sweden, which also gets absolute bumfuck nothing. And then the same thing goes for Israel. Not much to show here. And then we have a few new things. So let me show you the first one. It's the fuel slider. Now if you go to your test flight, for example, you'll see here availability of fuel. Keep in mind your min fuel is still your min fuel and your full tank is still your full tank. Makes sense, right? So you're not able to go below the 46 minutes, for example, on the Mosquito. So if you want to run an hour for whatever reason, you can do so, but you already could do that. However, on planes like the Meteor Mark 8 Reaper, for example, or just the regular one, it's actually pretty beneficial, because normally the min fuel of this thing is way too low. 7 minutes is not enough to play this plane, and 20 minutes is simply way too much. However, with this new system, you can say, I only want 10 minutes. And it's the same thing for other planes, like the CL-13B, for example. Because with the newer maps, which are slightly bigger than they used to be, this plane was completely useless with min fuel. 6 minutes on this thing didn't work. 20 minutes was way too much. However, now you can instead go 30% fuel. You can maybe go 50% fuel, which is 11 minutes. Now, I'll probably run it on 10 or 9. Kind of just comes down to personal preference. I will personally always run between 10 to 15 minutes of fuel, depending on the plane, of course. If you have an afterburner, that doesn't really work, but on subsonics, this is a great change. However, keep in mind that with a lot of the props, for example, let's look at another one though, I can't find it, the B7A2. Like this thing has an obscene amount of fuel, 1 hour 30. Unfortunately, you're not able to go below it, so you just have to cope with it. But the fuel slider is now in development. It will probably drop in the next update. And I think a lot of you guys are very happy with it. And then we have the next thing. We have this little missile up here. It's called Sensor View. Now I have a lot of this stuff turned off, because you'll see if I turn it all on, my PC is going to explode. The second they get in range, you'll see once everyone starts getting really in range, 45 FPS, 23 FPS, 15 FPS. Keep in mind, I have a 4090 and a 39900K. And I'm getting this kind of FPS with everything on. It's still super buggy, and I recommend turning a lot of this stuff off. Ground targets, for example, when you are flying ARB, it doesn't really matter. Air targets you can keep on. All the weapons I'd turn off, because that's basically everything that's flying around. Weapons attacking the player, that is relevant, so I'd keep it on. Allies, squad, you can probably turn off. And overall, now it will actually run properly. I shoot my missile off, and you can see you get a little bit of a stat card. It shows basically everything that's going on with the thing. So this actually makes it very easy to compare missiles. So I will definitely be using this stuff in the future in my videos, as long as it's not that buggy. You can now also see your radar on the bottom right, as well as your RWR on the bottom left. It doesn't work all the time, but it's the dev server. Things are bound to change. You can also see where your radar is looking. And this also goes for TV missiles, Mavericks and stuff like that. You can actually see if the missile was locked onto the thing you're shooting at, or if it was actually locked onto something close to it, and that's why it missed. Now, it's kind of hard to read because there's like no depth to it. For example, we have this MiG-29 SMT. He's 8.5 kilometers away, and look how big he is. If I turn it off, you can barely see his dot, but like this, he is incredibly massive. You can also tell that this missile is looking at something. It's kind of just a dud. It's dead. Like, it's not doing what you want it to do. So I'm just going to be ignoring it. I lock onto him because I notice the missile isn't going off or going for the right target. We shoot it off and it's tracking yet again. Now it's just super convenient. I'll show this clip in a minute in actual live time. Boom, he's done. The radar is still looking at him. Overall, it's just... this is great. This is a super good change. And I'm glad that something like this is finally in the game now. Now I would like to see that the trajectories of their enemies actually last a little bit longer, because of right now it's basically acrobatic smoke and it doesn't really last that long. Now we killed the first guy and we are looking for the second dude. There is someone here, we lock him up, and you can tell that my radar is kind of having trouble. I'm trying to lock him up and I get the missile off. It has a solid line, and you can see now that the missile's actually doing it on its own, because he has the white line. He is going for him. He's much further away than you might think. Oh no, don't start doing that. Okay, yeah, as I said, it's super buggy. I lock him up again, and he turns the other way and he dodges it. Fantastic. Now we are gonna... oh man, that is so... can I please get rid of that? Oh well, we can't. So we lock him up, and overall, you can see the missile now coming in. RWR doesn't work as of right now. But yeah, I'm a big fan. It's super buggy. It doesn't really work properly, but when it does work and the things that it is showing, this has a lot of potential, and I think this is great material for a channel like mine that is mostly talking about comparing stuff, looking at things, and just overall looking at how to play. And this gives you a lot of information. This also helps a tremendous amount with reviewing your own gameplay if something went wrong. So before you start yelling Russian or American bias or whatever, you can just look at the replay and see exactly what happened, which I think is a very welcome addition. And then we have the event. Now I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the short story is active radar homing missiles, and everyone is trying to sling their missiles off as quickly as possible to see how effective these missiles are. Now they don't act like phoenixes in that sense where you can cross map people with them. They are kind of like the AIM-7F and the R27 that we have right now, except they have active radar homing, which is fantastic for two reasons. You can actually defend against missiles while your missile continues to fly at them, so you don't have to worry about the gimbal limit and having your nose pointed at your enemy. And secondly, you can lock people up with TWS and just kind of switch between targets, and it's super convenient. TWS with these kind of missiles is absolutely essential to effectiveness. You can of course use it with the normal radar sets, but TWS is very good to have with active radar homing. So let's take a look at this clip right here. So I shoot a missile at this guy, and the second I do so, a missile in the rear also shows its head and flies towards me. So I can simply break lock. I don't have to worry about the lock on the F-16 in the background, and I can go and notch the missile that's coming my way. So I'm able to actually shoot the guy down, and I can defend, and because the Gripen or the F-16 didn't actually defend itself, I get the kill, I get away scot-free, and we basically win the engagement and are able to now go for someone else. With a semi-active radar homing missile, what has to happen there is I have to maintain lock in order for the F-16 to die. But if I do that, I'm not able to notch the missile coming in, and I will simply just eat shit and die. Now we lock onto this guy here. Now we go a bit lower here to make sure that we don't get slammed by the missile. And just like that, missiles are still gonna be killed by multipathing. And overall, I don't think it changes Put this in massive quotation marks, that much. Now, of course, what I mean with this is that on the small scale, the small fights, the fights are going to play out the same way. You defeat the missiles the same way, multi-patting, notching, going cold, using terrain, you know, all that good stuff that you are used to. So overall, the fights are going to play out roughly the same. The main issue comes from the fact that there is 16 people on each side of the map, and you can now shoot at multiple people at once with your TWS, and essentially every plane in the game is going to be a Tomcat. And we all know that the Tomcat is kind of annoying to deal with, not because the missiles are super good or because the Phoenixes are completely overpowered, but when there is like 50 of them flying your way, it's gonna be super detrimental to the game mode. And now we really cannot maintain this 16v60 lobby size. It's gonna be way too much. And as I said, like in these kind of fights, you still dodge the missile the same way. The issue is that now you can simply sling 20 of them across the map. And I'm gonna give you a purposefully bad example here, because this is not how they work. You can't just lock everyone up at the same time and send 4 of these missiles across the map and just fly away, collect your kills, go RTB and do it all over again. That won't really work. The range of them really isn't that fantastic as of right now, and you need to get them within that range where they actually start tracking themselves. So if you try to do this and try to get actually 6 to 4 time multi-kills, you're basically putting yourself in a position where you are going to get shit on and you are going to be sent back to the hangar. The thing that I'm doing right here is just to simply demonstrate that these things are not as brain dead as they might seem they are. At least as of right now. Of course, they are going to probably change them. The main strength comes from the smaller fights where you are, for example, 1v2 or 1v3. And they're coming from multiple directions. You shoot an AIM-120 off at the guy in front of you. You turn around. And by the time you engage the second guy behind you, the missile can just continue on flying towards the guy that's coming from behind now. And you will get a kill on the guy that's chasing you, provided he doesn't defend properly. So overall, I think on the small scale, in the small fights, these missiles won't pose much of a threat. The issue is that there is going to be 16 people that have at least 4 of these missiles. That will probably send about 50% of them before they even merge at the start. So there is just going to be missiles everywhere. There's going to be RWR pings going off on all different directions. You basically can't tell, and you are going to get overwhelmed even more as we did with just the IRCCM missile. So overall, I think it's going to not change much in the small scale. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it's going to just change the way people play, and that's going to be the main difference here. If you get small lobbies with people that are all proficient at the game, it's probably going to be roughly the same. It's going to be more tools for your toolbox, but it's not going to be super game breaking. However, if you get 16v16 with casual players, competitive players, people that don't really care, people that are maybe very new to the game and bought away into top tier, it's probably going to be one giant clusterfuck. But time will tell. I at least know that the event is an absolute clusterfuck at the very least. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, let me know down below. If I can't answer them, I bet someone else will be able to. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.